Get it out of here! This passport is fake!
Gate agent destroys black twins' passports. Moments later, their dad, who owns an airline, fires her. But what this veteran employee said while deliberately crumpling official U.S. travel documents will make you question whether airport authority has become a weapon for those who believe black children don't deserve to chase their dreams. These passports are fraudulent. The photos don't match you, they look photoshopped, and the expiration dates look altered. Gate agent Diane Barrett's voice carries across the JFK International Departure Gate, her 67 years of existence and 22 years with the airline giving her confidence that her racism will go unchallenged, her hands holding the passports of 13-year-old twins Brielle and Brianna Hayes like they're evidence of a crime instead of legitimate government documents. The words hit the twins like physical blows, standing at Gate B47 watching their dreams of Juilliard scholarships dissolve because a woman decided their black faces couldn't possibly belong to girls talented enough to compete in London, couldn't possibly be traveling internationally with expensive instruments, couldn't possibly have legitimate reasons to exist in spaces Diane believes belong to other people's children. Here's what people refuse to accept about racism in 2026. It's not just alive, it's evolved into something more insidious than anything the civil rights era faced because now it hides behind policy and procedure and I'm just doing my job. And in some ways that makes it more dangerous than segregation because at least then the hatred was honest. At least then the sign said exactly who wasn't welcome. Now racism wears a uniform and a smile and destroys your future while claiming it's protecting security. Brielle and Brianna aren't surprised by Diane's accusation. They're shocked, yes, because you're never quite prepared for an adult to call you a criminal to your face, to hold your passport like it's contraband, to announce your fraudulence to a gate full of witnesses. But surprised? No, this is their reality as black children in America. The music teacher who questioned whether they really composed their own pieces, the competition judge who seemed disappointed they won, the woman at the music store who followed them assuming they couldn't afford the instruments they came to buy. Each time the same message: you don't belong here, your success must be fake, your achievements must be stolen. But ma'am, these are real, Brielle tries to explain, her voice shaking. The State Department issued them 8 months ago. You can verify them, please just scan them. I don't need to scan anything. Diane's hands move deliberately. I can see they're fake. I'm confiscating these documents. You're not boarding this flight. She crumples one passport with both hands, the sound of expensive paper being destroyed audible to nearby passengers, then drops the other into the trash bin beside her desk like it's garbage, like it's not the key to these girls' entire future. Like destroying official documents is somehow less criminal than the fraud she's falsely accusing them of committing. Security will escort you for attempting to use fraudulent travel documents, Diane announces loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is what happens when you try to cheat the system. Brianna starts crying, understanding what's happening, their flight to London boarding right now, their audition tomorrow at 2 p.m. non-negotiable, their chance at Juilliard evaporating because racism wears a gate agent uniform. 90 minutes they'll be detained, passports destroyed, phones confiscated, unable to reach their father who's in a board meeting, unable to reach their mother who's in Geneva, unable to do anything but watch their flight depart without them, watch their dreams die because Diane decided black excellence must be fraudulent. If you believe no child should have their future destroyed by an adult's racism, keep watching. If you think discrimination at airports ended decades ago, you need to see what happens when these twins finally reach their father who built an airline from nothing and knows every regulation Diane just violated. And if you've ever been accused of fraud simply for existing while black, drop a comment below and tell us your story. We're reading every single one. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. This story doesn't end the way you think. Hit that like button if you stand against racism and subscribe to this channel because we're exposing the discrimination that happens when authority meets prejudice and children pay the price. Brielle asks the question that will break your heart. Daddy's going to fix this, right? He can get us new passports. We can still make it to London? But the flight is already boarding, their seats being given away, their instruments sitting uselessly beside them, their Juilliard dreams slipping away with every announcement, and Diane stands there satisfied, believing she's caught criminals when all she's done is destroy children. But to understand how two 13-year-old girls ended up watching their passports destroyed and their Juilliard dreams evaporate at JFK Gate B47, you need to know who Brielle and Brianna Hayes really are, and more importantly, you need to understand why this trip to London represents 5 years of sacrifice, thousands of hours of practice, and a family's belief that excellence could overcome the barriers racism erects. Brielle and Brianna Hayes are identical twins, 13 years old, 8th grade at Booker T. Washington Academy in Harlem, honor students who balance advanced academics with music that consumes every spare moment of their lives. Brielle plays violin with the kind of technical precision that makes audiences forget to breathe. Brianna plays cello with emotional depth that draws tears from stone-faced judges. Together they create harmonies that sound like conversation between souls who've known each other across lifetimes. They're polite and responsible beyond their years, raised by parents who taught them that being twice as good is the price of admission for Black children in spaces built for others, that excellence is armor against prejudice, that their success would honor ancestors who weren't allowed to dream this big. They practice 4 hours daily after school, weekends consumed by rehearsals and competitions, childhood sacrificed to the discipline that greatness demands, social lives reduced to orchestra friends who understand why they can't attend parties or movies or the normal activities 13-year-olds enjoy. 6 months ago they won the U.S. National Youth Orchestra Competition, their performance of Dvorak's string quartet in F major earning perfect scores from all 5 judges, the kind of victory that opens doors previously locked, that creates opportunities that didn't exist before, that makes people notice Black excellence even when they'd rather look away. The London World Youth Orchestra Finals is the pinnacle, where the top youth musicians from 40 countries compete for prizes that can define entire careers, where the top 3 finishers receive full scholarships to Juilliard, where 13-year-old twins from Harlem could secure futures their great-grandparents couldn't have imagined. Their father Julian Hayes built SkyBridge Regional Airlines from nothing, started with one used aircraft and a dream 20 years ago, grew it into a profitable carrier serving the East Coast, knows every aviation regulation and protocol because he had to be perfect to compete with established airlines, had to overcome banks that wouldn't lend to Black entrepreneurs, partners who doubted his competence, customers who questioned whether a Black-owned airline could be safe. Their mother Nicole Hayes is a U.S. diplomat stationed at the Geneva mission, brilliant career earned through excellence that couldn't be denied, currently negotiating trade agreements that affect millions but took time from those negotiations to arrange meeting her daughters in London, coordinating schedules across time zones to be there when they compete. This trip represents everything the Hayes family believes about achievement and opportunity, about doors that open when you're undeniably excellent, about the American dream that works if you work hard enough, beliefs that are about to be shattered by a gate agent who sees 2 Black girls with expensive instruments and decides they must be criminals. That morning the twins woke at 4 a.m., too excited and nervous to sleep, reviewed their sheet music one final time, checked and rechecked that their instruments were properly packed, that their performance outfits were wrinkle-free, that everything they needed for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was accounted for. Julian drove them to JFK in pre-dawn darkness, the conversation mixing encouragement and practical reminders. You've practiced enough, trust your preparation, remember to breathe before you start, Mama will meet you at Heathrow, text me when you land, I'm so proud of you both. Check-in went smoothly, the counter agent friendly and efficient, commenting on their instrument cases and wishing them luck in the competition. Security was routine, TSA agents professional, one asking about the competition and saying his daughter plays piano, small talk that felt normal and promising. The gate area was typical international departure chaos, business travelers on laptops, families with small children corralling excitement, college students with oversized backpacks, the usual mix of humanity heading across the Atlantic for reasons ranging from mundane to life-changing. Brielle and Brianna found seats near the windows overlooking the tarmac, practiced fingering exercises on imaginary instruments, reviewed their audition pieces mentally, tried to manage the nervous energy that comes before performances that matter, before moments that could define their entire futures. Then Diane Barrett arrived for her shift, 57 years old with 22 years at the airline, a veteran gate agent whose personnel file contains 17 complaints for rudeness and suspected racial profiling, Complaints that were noted but never resulted in serious consequences because she had seniority and the union protected her, and airlines don't like admitting they employ racists. She's white, professional, appearing in her airline uniform, carrying herself with the authority of someone who's processed thousands of passengers, who knows the rules and believes her experience makes her judgment infallible, whose confidence intimidates people into compliance even when she's wrong. Diane scans the gate area, her eyes landing on Brielle and Brianna, two black teenagers with expensive instrument cases, traveling alone based on their unaccompanied minor tags, heading international, which requires passports and raises questions, fitting a profile that exists only in Diane's prejudiced assumptions about who belongs in premium travel. She watches them for several minutes, her expression skeptical, her body language suggesting she's identified a problem that needs addressing, her mind already constructing the narrative that these girls don't belong here, that something must be fraudulent, that her duty requires investigation. When boarding begins, Diane calls their names with particular emphasis, watches them approach with narrowed eyes, examines their boarding passes with exaggerated scrutiny like she's searching for evidence of wrongdoing. "Passports, please." Her voice carries an edge that suggests suspicion rather than routine verification. "I need to verify your travel documents." Brielle and Brianna hand over their U.S. passports, properly issued 8 months ago for this exact trip, photos clearly matching their faces, expiration dates years away, everything legitimate and in order. But Diane holds them under the desk light, tilting them at angles, running her fingers over the pages, performing an inspection far beyond standard procedure, her face showing she's decided to find something wrong regardless of what the documents actually show. But to understand how two 13-year-old girls ended up watching their passports destroyed and their Juilliard dreams evaporate at JFK Gate B47, you need to know who Brielle and Brianna Hayes really are, and more importantly, you need to understand why this trip to London represents 5 years of sacrifice, thousands of hours of practice, and a family's belief that excellence could overcome the barriers racism erects. Brielle and Brianna Hayes are identical twins, 13 years old, 8th grade at Booker T. Washington Academy in Harlem, honor students who balance advanced academics with music that consumes every spare moment of their lives. Brielle plays violin with the kind of technical precision that makes audiences forget to breathe. Brianna plays cello with emotional depth that draws tears from stone-faced judges. Together they create harmonies that sound like conversation between souls who've known each other across lifetimes. They're polite and responsible beyond their years, raised by parents who taught them that being twice as good is the price of admission for black children in spaces built for others, that excellence is armor against prejudice, that their success would honor ancestors who weren't allowed to dream this big. They practice 4 hours daily after school, weekends consumed by rehearsals and competitions, childhood sacrificed to the discipline that greatness demands, social lives reduced to orchestra friends who understand why they can't attend parties or movies or the normal activities 13-year-olds enjoy. 6 months ago they won the U.S. National Youth Orchestra Competition, their performance of Dvorak's string quartet in F major earning perfect scores from all 5 judges, the kind of victory that opens doors previously locked, that creates opportunities that didn't exist before, that makes people notice black excellence even when they'd rather look away. The London World Youth Orchestra Finals is the pinnacle, where the top youth musicians from 40 countries compete for prizes that can define entire careers, where the top 3 finishers receive full scholarships to Juilliard, where 13-year-old twins from Harlem could secure futures their great-grandparents couldn't have imagined. Their father Julian Hayes built SkyBridge Regional Airlines from nothing, started with 1 used aircraft and a dream 20 years ago, grew it into a profitable carrier serving the East Coast, knows every aviation regulation and protocol because he had to be perfect to compete with established airlines, had to overcome banks that wouldn't lend to black entrepreneurs, partners who doubted his competence, customers who questioned whether a black-owned airline could be safe. Their mother Nicole Hayes is a U.S. diplomat stationed at the Geneva mission, brilliant career earned through excellence that couldn't be denied, currently negotiating trade agreements that affect millions but took time from those negotiations to arrange meeting her daughters in London, coordinating schedules across time zones to be there when they compete. This trip represents everything the Hayes family believes about achievement and opportunity, about doors that open when you're undeniably excellent, about the American dream that works if you work hard enough, Beliefs that are about to be shattered by a gate agent who sees two black girls with expensive instruments and decides they must be criminals. That morning the twins woke at 4 a.m., too excited and nervous to sleep, reviewed their sheet music one final time, checked and rechecked that their instruments were properly packed, that their performance outfits were wrinkle-free, that everything they needed for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was accounted for. Julian drove them to JFK in pre-dawn darkness, the conversation mixing encouragement and practical reminders. You've practiced enough, trust your preparation, remember to breathe before you start, Mama will meet you at Heathrow, text me when you land, I'm so proud of you both. Check-in went smoothly, the counter agent friendly and efficient, commenting on their instrument cases and wishing them luck in the competition. Security was routine, TSA agents professional, one asking about the competition and saying his daughter plays piano, small talk that felt normal and promising. The gate area was typical international departure chaos, business travelers on laptops, families with small children corralling excitement, college students with oversized backpacks, the usual mix of humanity heading across the Atlantic for reasons ranging from mundane to life-changing. Brielle and Brianna found seats near the windows overlooking the tarmac, practiced fingering exercises on imaginary instruments, reviewed their audition pieces mentally, tried to manage the nervous energy that comes before performances that matter, before moments that could define their entire futures. Then Diane Barrett arrived for her shift, 57 years old with 22 years at the airline, a veteran gate agent whose personnel file contains 17 complaints for rudeness and suspected racial profiling, complaints that were noted but never resulted in serious consequences because she had seniority and the union protected her and airlines don't like admitting they employ racists. She's white, professional appearing in her airline uniform, carrying herself with the authority of someone who's processed thousands of passengers, who knows the rules and believes her experience makes her judgment infallible, whose confidence intimidates people into compliance even when she's wrong. Diane scans the gate area, her eyes landing on Brielle and Brianna, two black teenagers with expensive instrument cases, traveling alone based on their unaccompanied minor tags, heading international which requires passports and raises questions, fitting a profile that exists only in Diane's prejudiced assumptions about who belongs in premium travel. She watches them for several minutes, her expression skeptical, her body language suggesting she's identified a problem that needs addressing, her mind already constructing the narrative that these girls don't belong here, that something must be fraudulent, that her duty requires investigation. When boarding begins, Diane calls their names with particular emphasis, watches them approach with narrowed eyes, examines their boarding passes with exaggerated scrutiny like she's searching for evidence of wrongdoing. Passports, please. Her voice carries an edge that suggests suspicion rather than routine verification. I need to verify your travel documents. Brielle and Brianna hand over their U.S. passports, properly issued 8 months ago for this exact trip, photos clearly matching their faces, expiration dates years away, everything legitimate and in order. But Diane holds them under the desk light, tilting them at angles, running her fingers over the pages, performing an inspection far beyond standard procedure, her face showing she's decided to find something wrong regardless of what the documents actually show. Diane holds the passports under her desk lamp for what feels like an eternity, her fingers tracing the edges with theatrical suspicion, her eyes squinting at details that don't require squinting, performing an inspection designed to intimidate rather than verify, making the twins wait while other passengers board around them. These photos don't look right. Diane's voice carries loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The lighting is off, the resolution seems altered, this looks like amateur Photoshop work. Brielle exchanges a confused glance with Brianna, both girls understanding that something is terribly wrong but not yet grasping the full scope of what's about to happen. Ma'am, those are official U.S. State Department passports, Brielle says politely. They were issued 8 months ago at the federal office in Manhattan. Everything is legitimate. Diane ignores her explanation, continues her performance of scrutiny. And these expiration dates, she taps the page with one manicured fingernail. The printing looks inconsistent, like someone tried to extend the validity period. This is exactly what fraudulent documents look like. That's not true, Brianna's voice shakes slightly. Our passports are valid until 2034. That's the standard 10-year validity for minors. You can verify this with customs. You can scan them in your system. I don't need to scan anything. Diane's voice goes cold with authority. I've been doing this job for 22 years. I know a fake passport when I see one, and these are definitely fake. She calls over her supervisor Marcus Chin, a man in his 40s who approaches with the wary expression of someone who's dealt with Diane's suspicions before, who knows she has a history of complaints but also knows challenging her creates problems with the union. Marcus, what's your assessment? Diane hands him the passports. These girls are trying to board an international flight with what appear to be fraudulent documents. I think we need to involve security. Marcus examines the passports with more genuine care than Diane showed, his trained eyes looking for actual irregularities. Finding none, the documents clearly legitimate to anyone without predetermined bias. Diane, these look fine to me, he says carefully. The photos match, the security features are present, nothing indicates fraud. But Diane isn't interested in his assessment, has already decided these black girls with expensive instruments must be criminals. Look closer, Marcus. The expiration dates are altered. The photos are photoshopped. We can't let obviously fake documents get through just because we're afraid of profiling accusations. The word profiling hangs in the air, Diane using it as a shield, suggesting that anyone who questions her judgment is enabling crime, weaponizing anti-discrimination language to justify discrimination itself. Marcus hesitates, caught between his professional assessment that the passports are real and his institutional reluctance to contradict a senior colleague in front of passengers, his silence becoming complicity, his failure to intervene enabling what comes next. Fine, Diane says when Marcus doesn't back her strongly enough. If you won't make the call, I will. I'm confiscating these fraudulent documents and reporting these passengers for attempting to use fake identification. Ma'am, please. Brielle's voice rises with desperation. We have a competition in London tomorrow. We've been preparing for 5 years. If we miss this flight, we lose everything. Please just scan the passports. Please verify them properly. I've verified them. Diane's hands move with deliberate cruelty. And they're fake. She takes Brielle's passport in both hands and crumples it, the expensive paper crinkling under the pressure of her fingers, the sound audible to everyone nearby. The physical destruction of an official government document happening in full view of witnesses who stand frozen and silent. No, Brianna screams. Those are real, you can't destroy them, those are official documents. But Diane isn't finished, picks up Brianna's passport and drops it into the trash bin beside her desk, the document landing among coffee cups and discarded boarding passes, treated like garbage, the twins watching in horror as their ability to travel internationally disappears into waste. These are confiscated as fraudulent, Diane announces loudly. Security will escort you for attempting to use fake documents to board an international flight. This is a federal crime and you will be detained. The nearby passengers watch with expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to that particular studied ignorance that lets people pretend they're not witnessing injustice. Phones come out to record but voices stay silent. Witnesses accumulating but no one intervening, no one telling Diane she's wrong, no one standing between authority and its victims. A businessman in the gate area pulls out his phone and starts filming, capturing Diane's performance, the crumpled passport, the twins' tears, evidence that will matter later but doesn't help now when help is needed. Please, we need to call our father, Brielle begs. He can verify everything, he can explain, please just let us call him. Your phones are evidence, Diane gestures to airport security officers who've arrived. Confiscate their devices, they're attempting to flee before we can properly investigate their fraudulent documents. 2 security officers, young men who look uncomfortable but follow Diane's authority, take the twins' phones, their instruments, their carry-on bags, everything that connects them to the outside world, leaving them isolated and powerless in a space designed to process threats. You're making a mistake, Brianna sobs. Our father owns an airline, he knows all the regulations, you're violating protocol, you can't just destroy valid passports. Your father owns an airline, Diane's laugh is cruel and mocking. Sure he does, and I'm the Queen of England, you girls need better lies if you're going to commit fraud. She turns to the gathering crowd of passengers waiting to board. Let this be a lesson, she announces. This is what happens when you try to cheat the system, when you think you can use fake documents and get away with it, Security doesn't play games with international travel fraud. The twins stand there destroyed, watching their flight board without them, watching their Juilliard dreams evaporate, watching racism perform itself with the confidence of authority, powerless to stop it, unable to reach parents who could help, trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by a woman who decided their black excellence must be criminal. Marcus Chen watches from nearby, his conscience telling him this is wrong but his institutional cowardice keeping him silent, another bystander who will later claim he had no choice when the truth is he chose his comfort over their justice. The London flight begins final boarding, the gate door will close in minutes, and Brielle and Brianna Hayes stand detained, passports destroyed, dreams dying, learning the brutal lesson that sometimes excellence isn't armor enough against hatred with a badge. The security officers escort Brielle and Brianna to a small holding room near the gates, a windowless space with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting that hums with the particular frequency of institutional spaces designed to make people feel small and powerless and forgotten. "We didn't do anything wrong," Brielle says through tears that won't stop falling. "Our passports were real. She destroyed them for no reason. We're going to miss our audition. We're going to lose Juilliard." The younger security officer, whose name tag reads Martinez, looks uncomfortable but doesn't release them, doesn't question Diane's authority, doesn't do anything except follow orders that feel wrong but challenging them feels harder. "We have to wait for the airport police," he says without meeting their eyes. "They'll sort this out." But sorting it out takes time they don't have, minutes ticking by while their flight sits at the gate, while their seats are given to standby passengers, while their instruments sit confiscated and their phones sit locked in evidence bags, while their ability to contact anyone who could help remains deliberately severed. Brianna rocks back and forth in her chair, the motion unconscious, a self-soothing behavior from childhood when stress became overwhelming, her mind calculating the impossibility of what they're facing. "Even if they release us right now, we've missed the flight. Even if we could get new passports issued, it would take days. The audition is tomorrow at 2 p.m. There's no way to make it." "Don't say that." Brielle grabs her sister's hand. "Daddy will fix this. He always fixes things. He'll know what to do." But their father is in a board meeting 300 miles away, their mother is in Geneva 7 time zones ahead, and they're trapped in a room with no phone, no way to reach anyone, no way to explain that their entire future is dissolving because a gate agent decided black excellence must be fraudulent. 30 minutes pass, then 40, the clock on the wall mocking them with each minute that brings them closer to missing everything they've worked toward, every practice session, every sacrifice, every hour choosing music over normal teenage life, all of it evaporating because Diane Barrett's racism carries institutional authority. The door opens and Airport Police Detective Sarah Williams enters, a black woman in her 50s whose expression suggests she's seen this scenario too many times, whose first question tells the twins she already suspects what really happened here. "Let me see the passports that were allegedly fraudulent," she says to Martinez. "The gate agent destroyed them," Martinez admits. "She crumpled one and threw the other in the trash, said they were fake and she was confiscating them. She destroyed the evidence," Williams's voice goes flat. "She destroyed what she claimed were fraudulent documents before anyone could verify her assessment. That's not protocol, that's suspicious." She pulls out her radio, calls for Diane to be brought to the security office, her voice carrying authority that makes it clear this isn't a request, turns back to the twins with an expression that mixes sympathy and frustration. "Tell me exactly what happened from the beginning, don't leave anything out." Brielle and Brianna tell their story through tears and shaking voices, the harassment, the theatrical inspection, the accusation of fraud, the deliberate destruction of valid passports, the confiscation of their phones, the public humiliation, 90 minutes of their lives stolen by hatred wearing a uniform. Williams takes notes, her jaw tightening as the story unfolds, her professional demeanor cracking slightly when Brianna describes watching her passport land in the trash. "Those were valid U.S. passports issued by the State Department," she says, more to herself than to them. "Destroying them is a federal crime. She didn't confiscate them, she destroyed government property." "Can we call our father now?" Brielle asks desperately. "Please, we need to tell him what happened. He needs to know why we're not on the plane." Williams retrieves their phones from evidence, hands them back with an apology that feels inadequate against the magnitude of what they've lost. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she says. "This never should have happened. Gate agents don't have authority to destroy passports. This woman way overstepped." Brielle's hands shake as she unlocks her phone, sees 17 missed calls from their father. The board meeting must have ended. He knows something is wrong. She calls him back and the phone rings once before he answers. "Brielle?" Julian's voice carries relief and confusion. "Why you calling from a strange number? Wait, you're on your phone? Why aren't you in the air? What's happening?" And Brielle breaks, the stress of 90 minutes collapsing at once, her voice coming out in sobs that make words almost unintelligible. "Daddy, the gate lady destroyed our passports. She said they were fake. She crumpled Bree's and threw mine in the trash. We missed our flight. We're in a security room. Daddy, we're going to miss Juilliard. Everything is gone." The line goes completely silent, the kind of silence that comes before explosions, before the unleashing of power held in check by civilization and courtesy, before a father who built an airline from nothing decides that protecting his daughters matters more than propriety. Put the gate agent on the phone. Julian's voice when it returns is completely calm, dangerously calm, the calm of someone who's decided that consequences are about to be delivered with precision. Right now, put her on the phone immediately. If you've ever watched talented children have their dreams destroyed by an adult's prejudice, if you've ever seen racism use procedure as a weapon while bystanders stay silent, this moment should make you angry enough to act. 17 people at that gate watched Diane destroy those passports, and not one intervened until it was too late. Subscribe if you believe witnesses who do nothing share responsibility for the harm they watch happen. Like this video if you think protecting children's futures matters more than avoiding confrontation, because what Julian does next will show you that sometimes a father's authority backed by knowledge and power can deliver justice that the system failed to provide. Detective Williams takes the phone, explains who she is, confirms that the passports were destroyed, provides her badge number and incident report number, hands the phone back to Brielle when Julian asks to speak to his daughter again. "Baby, I need you to listen carefully." Julian's voice is steady now, controlled, the voice he uses when commanding his airline through emergencies. "I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 3 hours. Do not let them move you anywhere. Stay with Detective Williams. I'm going to fix this." "But Daddy, the audition." Brianna leans close to hear. "We can't make it. Even if we get new passports, we can't make it in time." "Yes, you can," Julian says with absolute certainty. "Trust me, I'm going to get you to London. I'm going to get you to that audition. And the woman who did this to you is going to learn that destroying my daughter's dreams was the biggest mistake of her career." He hangs up and Brielle looks at Brianna, both of them wanting desperately to believe their father can fix this, knowing logically that some things can't be fixed, that time and distance and bureaucracy can't be overcome even by determination and love. While Julian makes the 3-hour drive from his office to JFK, Brielle and Brianna sit in that sterile holding room watching the clock tick away not just minutes but their entire future, each passing moment another nail in the coffin of dreams they've carried since they were 8 years old. "We should be over the Atlantic right now," Brianna says quietly, her voice empty of the emotion that's been wrung out by 90 minutes of crying. "We should be watching movies, eating the terrible airplane food, being excited about London. Instead we're sitting here like criminals." Brielle pulls out her sheet music from her bag, the pages worn from thousands of hours of practice, margins filled with penciled notes about breathing and timing and expression, every mark representing a moment of her childhood sacrifice to excellence that was supposed to matter, that was supposed to open doors, that turned out to be insufficient armor against racism. "Do you remember when we first learned this piece?" Brielle's finger traces the opening bars of the Dvorak Quartet. "We were 9. It felt impossible. Mama said if we could master it by 13 we'd be ready for competitions like London. And we did master it." Brianna's voice breaks. "We practiced 4 hours a day for 4 years. We gave up birthday parties and sleepovers and being normal kids. We made ourselves good enough, and it didn't matter. Being good enough didn't matter when that woman decided we were criminals." Detective Williams sits with them, her presence both comfort and reminder of how completely the system failed, how authority protected authority until it was too late, how procedure enabled rather than prevented injustice. "Can I ask you something?" Williams says gently. "Has this kind of thing happened before? People questioning your achievements? Assuming you don't belong?" The twins exchange glances, the look of people who share a lifetime of microaggressions and outright discrimination, who've developed silent communication about when to share and when to protect themselves from having to educate people about their own oppression. All the time, Brielle says finally. At our school they put us in remedial music until we auditioned and proved we were advanced. At competitions judges seem surprised when we play well. At music stores employees follow us assuming we're stealing. People see black girls with expensive instruments and their first thought is always that something is wrong. I had a teacher tell me I probably didn't compose my own pieces, Brianna adds, her voice bitter with memory. Said they were too sophisticated for someone my age, wanted me to prove I wrote them by composing something on the spot. I had to create a new piece in 20 minutes to prove I wasn't a fraud. Williams shakes her head, anger and sadness mixing in her expression. I'm sorry, she says simply. I'm sorry the world makes you prove yourselves constantly. I'm sorry excellence isn't enough protection. I'm sorry that woman destroyed your passports because she couldn't imagine black girls earning something she thinks belongs to other people's children. The door opens and Diane Barrett is escorted in by airport security, her earlier confidence replaced by defensive anger, her face showing she knows something has shifted but not yet understanding how completely her authority is about to dissolve. These are the girls who tried to board with fake passports, Diane says to Williams, still playing her role. I did my job, I protected the integrity of international travel. If you're here to second-guess my professional judgment. Where are the passports? Williams interrupts. The ones you claim were fraudulent, I need to examine them myself. I destroyed them, Diane says with satisfaction. Standard protocol for confiscated fraudulent documents. I didn't want them circulating and being used again. Show me the protocol that authorizes gate agents to destroy passports. Williams's voice is steel. Chapter and verse. Show me where it says you can unilaterally destroy government documents without verification, without consulting customs, without any oversight. Diane's confidence wavers, realizing perhaps that her actions can't be defended by procedure, that destroying evidence of her own judgment was itself evidence of something wrong. I've been doing this for 22 years, Diane tries. I know fake passports when I see them. These girls were obviously using fraudulent documents. They're teenagers traveling alone internationally with expensive instruments. It didn't add up. It didn't add up to you because you couldn't imagine black girls being talented enough to compete internationally, Williams says flatly. You saw their skin color and decided they must be criminals, then you destroyed the evidence before anyone could prove you wrong. That's not true, Diane's voice rises. This has nothing to do with race. I would have questioned anyone in the same circumstances. What circumstances exactly? Williams presses. Two well-dressed teenagers with valid boarding passes, proper identification, legitimate reasons to travel. What about that scenario justified destroying their passports? Brianna starts crying again, the sound quiet but devastating, the crying of someone who's lost something irreplaceable, who's watching adults argue about procedure while her future dies. We practiced so hard, Brianna says to no one in particular. We gave up everything normal kids do, we made ourselves perfect, we earned our place in that competition, and she took it away because she didn't think we deserved it, because she looked at us and saw criminals instead of musicians. The businessman who filmed the confrontation appears at the door, his phone in hand. Detective Williams, he says, I have video of the entire interaction, I have her destroying the passports, I have her refusing to verify them, I have everything. Williams takes his contact information, watches the video, her expression darkening with each frame. This is clear evidence of destruction of government property, she says. Ms. Barrett, you're being detained pending investigation. You have the right to remain silent. You can't arrest me for doing my job. Diane's voice goes shrill. I protected the airline. I prevented fraud. You're only questioning me because these girls played the race card. Ma'am, you destroyed valid U.S. passports issued by the State Department, Williams says calmly. That's a federal crime regardless of your motivation, and these girls have been detained for 90 minutes based on your false accusations. That's unlawful imprisonment. That's multiple charges. Airport security escorts Diane out, her protests fading down the hallway, her 22-year career ending because she let racism override judgment, because she wielded authority as a weapon against children whose only crime was excellence while black. But justice for Diane doesn't restore the twins' passports, doesn't get them on a plane, doesn't undo 90 minutes of trauma or repair trust that's been shattered in institutions that were supposed to protect them. How long until Daddy gets here? Brielle asks Williams, her voice small and tired. How long until someone makes this better? He said 3 hours, it's been 1. Williams checks her watch. 2 more hours, then your father arrives and we'll see what can be done. But both twins know that 2 hours might as well be forever, that every minute takes them further from London, further from the audition, further from Juilliard, further from the future they built through sacrifice and discipline and the naive belief that merit matters more than melanin. Julian Hayes arrives at JFK exactly 2 hours and 47 minutes after receiving Brielle's call, his face showing the particular combination of fury and control that comes from a man who spent 20 years building an airline by being smarter and more prepared than everyone who doubted a black entrepreneur could succeed in aviation. He walks through the terminal with purpose that parts crowds, people instinctively moving aside for someone radiating that kind of focused intensity, reaches the security office where Detective Williams has kept his daughters safe, the door opening before he can knock because Williams heard his footsteps and knew who was coming. Daddy? Both twins rush to him simultaneously, their synchronized movement reflecting 13 years of shared existence, collapse into his arms with the kind of crying that's been held back waiting for the one person who makes it safe to completely fall apart. I'm here, baby girls. Julian holds them both, his voice steady despite the rage burning underneath. Daddy's here. I'm going to fix this. I promise you I'm going to fix everything. He looks over their heads at Detective Williams, who's standing respectfully back, giving them space for reunion. Detective Williams, he says, his voice shifting to the tone he uses for business. Walk me through exactly what happened, every detail. Don't leave anything out. Williams provides a thorough account, the destroyed passports, the 90-minute detention, the confiscated phones, Diane's accusations, her arrest, the video evidence, all of it delivered with the precision of someone who knows she's briefing a man who understands systems and knows how to use them. She destroyed valid U.S. State Department passports, Julian repeats, making sure he understands correctly. She didn't confiscate them for verification. She physically destroyed them in front of witnesses, then detained my daughters based on false accusations of fraud? That's correct, Williams confirms. She crumpled one and threw the other in the trash, multiple witnesses including video evidence, then your daughters were held here while their flight departed. Julian pulls out his phone, makes 3 calls in rapid succession, each conversation brief and commanding. First to his head of legal, I need emergency passport replacement for my daughters, I don't care what it costs, I need State Department expedited service within 6 hours. Second to his operations director, I need a transatlantic capable aircraft ready to fly to London tonight. Charter it if we don't have anything available, cost is irrelevant. Third to the CEO of the airline whose gate agent destroyed his daughter's dreams. This is Julian Hayes. We need to talk immediately, in person. Your employee just committed multiple federal crimes against my children. The twins watch their father work, seeing the man who built an empire from nothing deploy that power for them, seeing authority that exists not because of a badge or uniform but because of competence and success that can't be denied. But Daddy, even if we get new passports, Brianna's voice is hollow with grief. Even if you charter a plane, we can't make it. The audition is tomorrow at 2 p.m. London time. We'd have to leave in the next few hours to make it with the time difference. It's impossible. Julian kneels in front of his daughters, takes both their hands. Listen to me carefully, he says, his voice carrying absolute certainty. I have a Gulfstream G650 chartered. It's the fastest civilian aircraft available. It can make JFK to London in 6 hours. I have contacts at the State Department working on emergency passport replacement. They'll be ready in 4 hours. We will have you wheels up by 8 p.m. You'll land at Heathrow at 2 a.m. London time. That gives you 12 hours before your audition. But we're exhausted, Brielle says, the practical part of her brain calculating all the things that can still go wrong. We haven't slept. We've been crying for hours. We're supposed to perform the most important audition of our lives after all this trauma? You're going to rest on the plane, Julian says firmly. You're going to eat, you're going to sleep, you're going to arrive in London with enough time to shower and warm up and be ready. I'm flying with you. Your mother is meeting us there. We're going to get you to that audition. What about the woman who did this? Brianna asks, anger finally breaking through the grief. What happens to her? Does she just get away with destroying our passports and almost destroying our futures? Julian's expression goes cold, the kind of cold that comes before consequences that will reshape lives. Detective Williams arrested her for destruction of government property and unlawful detention. She's facing federal charges. But that's not enough. That's just criminal justice. I'm meeting with her airline CEO in 30 minutes. I'm going to make sure she never works in aviation again. I'm going to make sure everyone who witnessed what she did and said nothing faces consequences. I'm going to make sure this airline learns that targeting black children has a cost they can't afford to pay. The airline CEO Martin Crawford arrives 20 minutes later, his face showing he understands the magnitude of the situation, that Julian Hayes isn't just an angry parent but the owner of a competing airline who has leverage and knowledge and the ability to make this a very expensive problem. Mr. Hayes, Crawford extends his hand. Julian doesn't take it. I am deeply sorry for what happened to your daughters. This is unacceptable. We're conducting a full investigation. Your investigation is irrelevant. Julian's voice could freeze water. Your employee destroyed valid passports, detained my daughters for 90 minutes, caused them to miss an international flight to a competition that could determine their entire futures, all based on racial profiling that your system enabled by ignoring 17 previous complaints against her. Crawford's face pales, realizing Julian has already done the research, already knows about Diane's history. Those complaints were investigated, he tries weakly. And dismissed, Julian interrupts. 17 times passengers complained about her behavior, 17 times your airline decided protecting a senior employee mattered more than addressing racism. Well, now that racism targeted the wrong family and you're going to learn exactly how expensive that decision was. What do you want? Crawford asks, understanding this is about to cost his airline in ways beyond legal settlements. I want her fired immediately. Julian lists his demands. I want her pension revoked. I want her permanently banned from aviation employment. I want every employee who witnessed what she did and said nothing disciplined. I want your entire gate staff retrained on racial bias and passport verification. And I want a public apology that acknowledges your systemic failure enabled this. We can do most of that. Crawford hedges on the public apology. But acknowledging systemic failure opens us to massive liability. You already have massive liability, Julian says flatly. I'm offering you a choice. Make this right publicly and I'll consider not filing a civil suit that will cost you tens of millions and destroy your reputation, or protect your pride and watch me take this to every media outlet and regulatory agency that will listen. The twins watched this negotiation, seeing their father wield power they didn't know existed, seeing him demand accountability not just for them but for every passenger who's ever been profiled by Diane, every complaint that was ignored, every time the system chose protecting itself over protecting victims. 4 hours after Julian's arrival, a State Department official named Catherine Morrison appears at JFK with 2 emergency passports, her presence reflecting the kind of strings Julian pulled, the favors called in, the influence wielded by a man who spent 20 years building relationships with people who can move bureaucracy when it usually refuses to move. Mr. Hayes, these are temporary travel documents valid for 30 days, Morrison explains, handing over the dark blue booklets. They'll get your daughters to London and back. Permanent replacements will be issued through normal channels once they return. Julian examines them with the thoroughness of someone who knows exactly what proper documentation looks like, confirms the photos match, the information is correct, the State Department seal is legitimate, everything Diane claimed was fake about the original passports now proven real by their immediate replacement. Thank you, Catherine, Julian says with genuine gratitude. I know you moved heaven and earth to get these issued this fast. I won't forget this favor. The twins hold their new passports like they're made of glass, like they might dissolve if handled too roughly, still not quite believing that the impossible might actually be possible, that London might not be lost. The chartered Gulfstream G650 waits on a private terminal tarmac, sleek and powerful, capable of crossing the Atlantic faster than any commercial flight, luxury that exists for emergencies exactly like this, for when money and connections can overcome obstacles that would defeat normal people. Julian's phone rings, Nicole calling from Geneva, her diplomat's composure cracking when she hears her daughter's voices. Mama, we're okay, Brielle says, trying to sound stronger than she feels. Daddy fixed it, we're getting on a plane, we're going to make it. Baby girls, I'm so sorry this happened. Nicole's voice carries across time zones and continents. I'm sorry that woman hurt you. I'm sorry the world is still so cruel. I'm flying to London right now. I'll be there when you land. The twins board the Gulfstream with their father, sink into leather seats that are obscenely comfortable compared to the plastic chairs they've spent hours sitting in, their instruments carefully stowed, their carry-on bags returned, their phones charged and functioning, everything that was taken from them restored except the 5 hours of their lives spent detained and traumatized. Try to sleep, Julian urges as the plane taxis. You need rest, you need to arrive ready to perform, everything else can wait. But sleep feels impossible. Adrenaline and trauma and lingering disbelief keeping them wired despite exhaustion, Brianna staring out the window watching New York disappear beneath them, Brielle reviewing her sheet music for the 1000th time even though she could play it perfectly while unconscious. Daddy, what if we can't do it? Brielle asks quietly. What if the stress broke something? What if we get there and we can't perform? What if everything we've been through today ruined our ability to play? Julian moves to sit between them, puts an arm around each daughter. You know what makes you special, he says. It's not just your talent, lots of kids are talented. What makes you special is your resilience, your ability to face hard things and not break. You've been handling racism and doubt and people underestimating you your entire lives, and you kept practicing, kept improving, kept proving them wrong. But this was different, Brianna says, tears returning. This wasn't just someone doubting us. This was someone destroying our documents, trapping us, making us miss our flight, trying to take away everything we worked for. And what did you do when that happened? Julian asks. You called for help, you didn't give up, you trusted that someone would fight for you, you held together even when everything felt broken. That's strength, that's what will get you through tomorrow's audition. The flight attendant brings food, urges them to eat even though neither twin feels hungry, their stomachs tight with stress, but Julian insists and they force down chicken and vegetables and bread, fueling bodies that will need energy tomorrow. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Brielle finally falls asleep, her head against the window, exhaustion claiming what willpower couldn't maintain, Brianna following minutes later, both twins getting the rest they desperately need even if it's not enough, even if they'll arrive in London running on fumes and determination. Julian stays awake the entire flight, making calls to lawyers about criminal charges against Diane, to his head of HR about hiring practices that prevent future incidents, to media contacts about whether going public serves his daughters or just subjects them to more trauma, calculating revenge and protection in equal measure. Back at JFK, Diane Barrett sits in a holding cell, her 22-year career ended, her federal charges mounting, her attorney explaining that destruction of government property carries up to 5 years in prison, that unlawful detention adds more time, that her comfortable retirement just became a distant dream replaced by legal bills and possible incarceration. I was just doing my job. Diane keeps repeating, still not understanding that her job never included destroying documents, never included racial profiling, never included weaponizing authority against children whose excellence threatened her worldview. The businessman who filmed everything uploads his video to social media, the footage going viral within hours, millions watching Diane crumple a passport and throw another in the trash, watching her parade 2 crying teenagers as examples of fraud, watching racism perform itself with absolute confidence that it would go unchallenged. The comments flood in outrage and support mixing with the inevitable defenders who insist race had nothing to do with it, who claim Diane had legitimate concerns, who demonstrate that no matter how clear the evidence, some people will always find ways to excuse racism when it targets people they've already decided don't deserve protection. Martin Crawford, the airline CEO, watches the video in his office, sees his company's uniform, his company's gate area, his company's employee committing crimes caught on camera, calculates the cost in lawsuits and lost business and destroyed reputation, realizes Julian Hayes was right about this being expensive, realizes 17 ignored complaints just became exhibits in a pattern of discrimination his airline can't defend. He calls his head of HR, his general counsel, his crisis management team. Fire Diane Barrett immediately for cause, he orders. Review her entire personnel file, identify everyone who received complaints about her and dismiss them. We need accountability up and down the chain. and draft a public statement acknowledging we failed these children. His legal counsel objects, warns that acknowledgement is admission, opens them to massive liability, but Crawford understands that the video already opened them to liability, that denying obvious wrongdoing just makes them look worse, that sometimes the only path forward requires eating the cost of past failures. The Gulfstream lands at Heathrow at 2:17 a.m. London time, the twins waking stiff and disoriented, their sleep fragmented by stressed dreams, their bodies protesting the rapid travel, their minds struggling to shift from trauma to performance mode. Nicole waits in the private terminal, pulls her daughters into an embrace that lasts full minutes, all three of them crying, Julian standing back watching his family reunited, watching his daughters slowly transform from victims back into the accomplished young women they were before Diane tried to break them. "You're here," Nicole keeps saying. "You made it, you're actually here. I wasn't sure it was possible, but you're here." "We have 11 hours until audition," Julian checks his watch. "First we get you to the hotel, you shower, you eat proper breakfast, you warm up your instruments, you remember who you are and what you came here to do." The hotel room overlooks the Thames, London morning light filtering through windows that should feel magical but instead just illuminate how exhausted the twins look, dark circles under their eyes, their movements slow with the particular fatigue that comes from trauma layered on top of jet lag and stress. "You need to eat." Nicole sets out breakfast that the hotel delivered, scrambled eggs and toast and fruit and orange juice, food neither twin wants but both know they need. "Your bodies can't perform on empty. You've been through hell but right now you have to pretend you haven't." Brielle picks at her eggs, forces down bites that taste like nothing, her mind already at the audition venue calculating all the ways today could go wrong. "What if our hands shake?" she says quietly. "What if we can't focus? What if every time I try to play I just see that woman destroying our passports?" "Then you play through it," Julian says firmly but not unkindly. "You take that anger, that hurt, that fear, and you pour it into the music, you make Dvorak sound like what you've survived, you show those judges emotion they've never heard before." "But we're supposed to be perfect," Brianna says, the weight of expectation crushing her. "Perfect technique, perfect intonation, perfect expression. How do we be perfect when we're broken?" Nicole sits beside her daughters, takes their hands. "You're not broken, baby girls, you're wounded but not broken. There's a difference. Broken things can't function, wounded things function despite pain, and that's actually closer to what music is supposed to be about." She pulls out her phone, plays a recording of Jacqueline du Pré performing Elgar's cello concerto, the legendary recording from 1965 when du Pré was 20 years old and playing with an intensity that still makes people cry decades later. "Listen to the emotion," Nicole says. Du Pré wasn't playing perfect notes, she was playing her whole heart, every hope and fear and dream she had. That's what made her legendary, not perfection but honesty, not technical brilliance but soul. The twins listen, hearing what their mother means, the way du Pré's cello seems to weep and rage and love all at once, the way imperfection in service of emotion becomes more moving than sterile perfection. At 11 a.m. they arrive at the Royal Albert Hall, the venue magnificent and intimidating, young musicians from 40 countries warming up in practice rooms, the sound of violins and cellos and violas creating a symphony of preparation, everyone here carrying their own stories of sacrifice and determination. Brielle and Brianna find their assigned practice room, pull out instruments that survived yesterday's nightmare, begin warming up with scales and arpeggios, their fingers remembering muscle memory even when their minds struggle with focus. A Korean girl violinist in the next room plays a passage from the Sibelius Concerto so perfectly it makes Brielle want to cry with inadequacy. "We can't compete with that," she whispers to Brianna. "Everyone here is perfect, everyone here had normal travel, everyone here is rested, we're going to fail." "Stop it," Brianna says sharply. "We didn't come this far to fail, Daddy didn't move heaven and earth to get us here so we could give up before we try. That woman tried to stop us and we're here anyway, that has to mean something." Their audition slot arrives at exactly 2 p.m., they walk onto the stage of one of the world's most famous venues, facing a panel of 5 judges whose faces reveal nothing, whose notebooks will determine whether 5 years of sacrifice leads to Juilliard or nowhere. "Names and peace please," the head judge asks, her British accent making everything sound more formal. "Brielle and Brianna Hayes from New York." Brielle says, her voice steadier than she feels. We'll be performing Dvorak's String Quartet No. 12 in F major, Opus 96, the American, second movement. They raise their instruments, Brielle's violin and Brianna's cello, make eye contact the way they've done thousands of times, the silent communication that comes from being twins and being partners and being people who've learned to function as one unit. The first notes emerge tentative, their hands shaking slightly, the trauma of yesterday interfering with muscle memory, and for horrible seconds it seems like fear might win, like Diane's cruelty might have broken something crucial after all. But then Brianna looks at Brielle and something passes between them, some acknowledgement of what they've survived, some decision that after everything they've been through they won't let this moment be stolen too, some transformation of pain into purpose. The music changes, becomes less about perfection and more about story, about two black girls who had to fight for the right to be here, who had their documents destroyed and their dignity attacked and their dreams nearly stolen, who made it to this stage not despite the trauma but carrying it, channeling it, using it. Brielle's violin begins to sing with emotion she's never accessed before, drawing on reserves of feeling that yesterday's nightmare unlocked, playing not just notes but narrative, not just Dvorak's composition but her own story woven through it. Brianna's cello answers with harmonies that sound like grief and determination intertwined, like the sound of crying but refusing to break, like the voice of someone who's learned that survival sometimes means performing while wounded, that strength isn't the absence of pain but the refusal to let pain win. The judges lean forward, something in the performance catching their attention. These are technically proficient teenagers but the emotion is something else entirely, something raw and real and honestly earned through suffering that shows in every phrase. 4 minutes into the 7-minute piece, Brielle feels tears running down her face, not from sadness but from release, from 5 years of pressure and yesterday's trauma and this moment's intensity all combining into something that has to come out, can't be contained, flows through her fingers into strings into sound. Brianna sees her sister crying, feels her own tears starting, knows they should stop, knows crying while performing is unprofessional, but can't stop and doesn't want to because the tears are part of the truth they're telling, part of what makes this performance different from the technically perfect competitors who had easy journeys here. They finish the final phrases, the music resolving into the quiet ending Dvorak wrote, the last notes hanging in the air of Royal Albert Hall, the silence after they stop playing lasting longer than normal because the judges seem to need time to process what they just heard. Thank you, the head judge finally says, her voice carrying something that might be respect or might be recognition. That was extraordinary, we'll notify you of results within 48 hours. Outside the audition room, Nicole and Julian wait, see their daughters emerge red-eyed and exhausted, can't tell from their faces whether it went well or terribly. We cried, Brielle says, like it's a confession. We cried while performing, we weren't perfect, we let everything we've been through show. Good, Nicole pulls them both close. Perfect is overrated, honest is what matters. You gave them truth instead of perfection, that's brave. But what if it wasn't good enough? Brianna asks, the question that haunts every performer after every audition. What if all of this, everything we went through, what if we still don't make it? Then we'll deal with that when it comes, Julian says. Right now you need to rest, you've earned rest. 48 hours feels like 48 years. The twins trying to be tourists in London but unable to focus on anything except waiting, checking their phones obsessively, jumping at every notification, their parents pretending confidence neither feels while privately calculating what comes next if Juilliard doesn't happen. The email arrives at 3:47 p.m. London time, from the World Youth Orchestra Finals Committee, subject line competition results. Brielle sees it first, her hands shaking so badly she can't tap to open it, passes the phone to Brianna who also can't make her fingers work. Finally Julian takes it and opens what will determine his daughter's futures. His face changes as he reads, something between shock and pride. He looks at his daughters who are barely breathing. You placed second, he says, his voice breaking slightly. Out of competitors from 40 countries, you placed second, full scholarship to Juilliard, everything you fought for, you got it. The twins scream, collapse into each other crying, 5 years of work and 24 hours of nightmare all resolving into this single moment. This validation that excellence combined with honest emotion was enough, that survival translated into success, that the woman who tried to destroy their dreams failed completely. The judge's comments come in the follow-up email, praising their technical skill but focusing more on their emotional depth, the way they made Dvorak's American Quartet feel personal and immediate, the way their performance carried weight that suggested lived experience beyond their years. There was something in your playing that we rarely hear, the head judge wrote. A maturity of emotion, an understanding of struggle and triumph. You didn't just play music, you told a story that moved us deeply. Nicole reads the comments through tears, understanding that what nearly destroyed her daughters actually gave them something competitors who had easy journeys couldn't access, that pain transformed into art became their advantage, that Diane's cruelty accidentally gave them depth. Back in New York, the legal and professional consequences continue unfolding with the methodical inevitability of justice delayed but not denied. Diane Barrett faces federal charges, destruction of government property and unlawful detention, her trial set for 6 months from now, her bail conditions including house arrest and surrender of passport, ironic punishment for someone who destroyed others' travel documents. But criminal charges are only part of her reckoning. The airline fires her immediately for cause, terminates her pension for misconduct, blacklists her from aviation employment, reduces 22 years of work to cautionary tale, proof that racism eventually costs everything when it targets the wrong family. Martin Crawford, the CEO, releases a public statement that doesn't hide behind corporate language or legal hedging, acknowledges that his airline failed to act on 17 complaints against Diane, admits that protecting a senior employee mattered more than protecting passengers, promises comprehensive retraining and accountability for everyone who enabled her behavior. 17 gate agents and supervisors who received complaints about Diane faced discipline ranging from written warnings to termination, the airline conducting internal investigation that exposes how institutional inertia and misplaced loyalty created space for prejudice to thrive, how each dismissed complaint made the next one easier to ignore. Julian's lawsuit seeks $10 million, settles for $7.5 million plus policy changes, the money less important than the admission of fault, the acknowledgement that his daughters deserved protection they didn't receive, that being black and talented shouldn't require also being resilient enough to survive systemic racism. The settlement includes mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees, revised protocols for passport verification that remove individual discretion, zero-tolerance policies for racial profiling with immediate termination for violations, systems designed to prevent the next Diane from destroying the next talented children. But money and policy changes don't undo trauma. The twins still have nightmares about destroyed passports, still feel anxiety at airports, still carry the memory of 90 minutes detained while dreams died, wounds that therapy helps but doesn't erase, scars that prove survival but at cost. 6 months after London, they moved to New York for Juilliard, their scholarship covering tuition and housing, their talent earning them spots in the most prestigious music conservatory in America, everything they worked for finally achieved but different than they imagined, colored by knowledge that excellence isn't always enough protection, that sometimes you need power and money and connections to get justice. Their first semester they're interviewed by NPR about their journey, asked how they survived what should have destroyed them, how they transformed trauma into triumph, whether they do it again knowing the cost. We didn't have a choice, Brianna says simply. Once that woman destroyed our passports, we either gave up or fought through. Giving up wasn't an option because that would mean she won. We made it to London, we made it to Juilliard, but we shouldn't have had to fight that hard. Nobody should have to overcome racism to achieve their dreams, Brielle adds. We were lucky, we had a father with resources and connections, we had parents who could charter planes and call State Department officials. What happens to talented kids whose parents can't do that? How many dreams get destroyed when there's no rescue coming? 5 years after Diane Barrett destroyed their passports, Brielle and Brianna Hayes graduate from Juilliard with honors, their senior recital attended by family who never doubted and judges who saw something special even when the twins were broken and crying, transforming trauma into art that moves audiences to tears. They're 18 now, no longer the 13-year-olds who watched their dreams nearly die at JFK Gate B47, but the memory stays with them, shapes how they see the world, informs the music they create, reminds them that excellence is necessary but not sufficient protection against racism that wears authority. We still think about that day, Brielle tells an interviewer from the New York Times. Every time we travel internationally, every time we see a gate agent, we remember what it felt like to be powerless, to watch someone destroy our documents and our future, to understand that being talented and prepared and right doesn't always matter. But we also remember what came after, Brianna adds. We remember our father moving heaven and earth, we remember making it to London against impossible odds, we remember placing second and earning Juilliard, we remember that sometimes the story doesn't end where racism wants it to end. Julian uses the $7.5 million settlement to establish the Hayes Foundation for Young Musicians, providing legal support and emergency resources for talented children who face discrimination, creating the safety net his daughters had but too many others lack, turning their nightmare into protection for the next generation. The foundation helps 30 children in its first year, pays for lawyers when schools try to exclude black students from advanced programs, funds emergency travel when competitions require resources families don't have, provides the intervention that makes the difference between dreams achieved and dreams destroyed. Diane Barrett serves 18 months in federal prison for destruction of government property, released early for good behavior but unemployable in her field, living on Social Security and bitterness, her comfortable retirement replaced by studio apartment and regret, consequences she still doesn't fully accept as deserved. She gives one interview upon release, claims she was doing her job, insists race had nothing to do with her decisions, demonstrates that some people never learn, never grow, never understand that their prejudice destroyed more than passports, it nearly destroyed futures. The viral video of her crumpling those passports remains online, a permanent record viewed by millions, used in training sessions about implicit bias, shown to gate agents and TSA officers and anyone with authority over travelers, cautionary tale about what happens when racism meets power without accountability. If you believe talented children shouldn't have to overcome systemic racism to achieve their dreams, if you think one family's resources shouldn't determine whether justice happens, subscribe to this channel because we're documenting the stories that show how broken systems hurt vulnerable people. Like this video if you understand that Brielle and Brianna survived not because the system worked but because their father had the power to force accountability, because without that power countless other children's dreams die quietly with no rescue coming. Every view spreads awareness that excellence should be enough, that black children shouldn't need billionaire fathers to protect them from racism at airports, that we all share responsibility for building systems that serve everyone equally. The twins perform regularly now, their music carrying depth that comes from understanding struggle, from knowing that beauty often emerges from pain, from surviving what should have broken them and choosing to create rather than to hate. They've forgiven the system that failed them, not because it deserves forgiveness but because carrying rage forever would poison the music they create, would let Diane win in ways she didn't manage to win when it mattered, would transform victims into people defined entirely by victimhood rather than by triumph. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. They speak at conferences about implicit bias in transportation, testify before Congress about passport verification protocols, use their platform to demand better, to insist that what happened to them becomes impossible for the children who come after. At their Juilliard graduation, with Nicole and Julian watching from the audience, they performed the same Dvorak piece they played in London, the American quartet that carried them through nightmare to success, the music that proved honest emotion matters more than sterile perfection. They play it differently now, with 5 more years of skill and maturity, but also with the knowledge that the tears they cried during that London audition were what made them special, what gave judges something they couldn't forget, what transformed trauma into scholarship into future. And in the audience, Julian Hayes watches his daughters succeed despite everything designed to stop them, remembers the phone call that changed everything, the desperate voice saying, "Daddy, the gate lady destroyed our passports," the 90 minutes of his daughters' lives stolen by racism he couldn't prevent but could punish. He built an airline to create opportunities, raised daughters to be excellent and resilient, discovered that sometimes being excellent and resilient and having a father with resources is barely enough to overcome prejudice with authority, wonders how many children lose everything because they lack just one of those advantages. The twins bow to thunderous applause, their Juilliard journey complete, their futures bright with possibility, their past shadowed by trauma that taught them survival, and the question remains whether any child should have to learn those lessons at the cost they paid.